Our best engineers, display this weird characteristics where they think 80% like engineers but 20% like product managers. Right? They really get embedded into the product as well as the process, and they take more responsibility and are okay with ambiguity. If you can take risks, because right now, what's the worst? Like, you're not married, you don't have a kid and a wife depending on you or whatever. Like, just take risks. What's the worst that can happen? Like, whatever it is, you can figure it out, right?
Hey guys, Harsh this side, one of the founders here at AccioJob. Today I have Sourav with me. Sourav was my senior through college. Fun fact, he was actually my teaching assistant in one of the courses in ML. After college, Sourav has now started his own company, grown the company to now a team size of more than 20 people. So let's just dive straight into what Sourav is doing at SalesRobot, and just first understand what SalesRobot is.
Sure. Thanks for having me on, man. So I started a company right out of college. That one didn't work out. Now I'm doing SalesRobot. With SalesRobot, the product is fairly straightforward. We are a SaaS company, like thousands of SaaS companies out there. What we do is we help sales teams automate their efforts on LinkedIn and email. The product is called SalesRobot. It's mostly used by B2B sales teams all across the world, mainly in US, UK, Canada, those kinds of geographies, to help them generate more leads, automate their work, and get more meetings without doing a lot of manual work. So in terms of the actual journey, the first thing is that when it comes to SaaS products, one of the things we realize that it's actually very hard to build good SaaS products, especially out of India, right? Because while there is an abundance of talent here, right? There's a lot of engineering talent out there, especially due to the whole IT services boom, right? With Infosys, TCS, and all, creating this kind of pool. The hard part is there is not really a good product DNA in those talents. So for us, the biggest learning and the biggest challenge, the biggest experience for us was on how to build a good team, right? Because especially an engineering team, because you get a lot of other talents out there. Like if you look at the other skill sets that are needed, which are things like sales, things like marketing, you see a lot more talent out there. But when it comes to engineering, it can be very counterintuitive to figure out how to hire good developers. So that's where I think that was one of the challenges we came across. The first engineer we hired, we had just put out a job on LinkedIn, and we got like 500 odd applicants, right? Even for a what was like 6 LPA job at that point, right? So we were like, okay, this is great, but also how do I figure out which engineers are good in this one, right? Like, because you see so many people with good credentials, but then they just don't know how to code, right? So what we figured out very early on was that we wanted to have a very clear assignment-based interview process, right? It shouldn't be a typical interview process where you come and solve a few puzzles around data structures, algorithms. We wanted to understand what somebody would be like to work with. So we created a very assignment-led interview process, and we figured out that out of those 500, when we sent the assignment, actually just 2 submitted.
Okay.
That was the conversion rate.
Right.
Out of those 2, we hired one. Right. He stayed with the company for about 12 months, but then we realized the whole process will repeat, right? Because when we have to hire again, we have to go through the same dribble of low conversion rate when it comes to actual skills, actually being able to code. So for us, it was very challenging because we wanted a little bit of experience. We were hiring our first engineer with like at least 1 year of experience. And then that was a point where I realized that, hey, actually this whole thing of building an engineering team is a separate skill set on its own. Right? Completely separate skill set as compared to building a engineering team, building a marketing team, building a sales team, and actually doing those things like sales, marketing. So that's when we realized that, hey, this problem, especially for early stage bootstrapped startups like us, is a very specialized skill set that you have to spend time learning. right? Like there's no other way to figure out this whole skill set. So that was the biggest learnings we had.
Right, great. Okay, so since you've already stated you found great difficulty in first of all finding a good dev and then building this whole team. During the job, that is during when the people are actually coding, what sorts of people were able to stand out in the team, or what sorts of skills do you think were especially suited to, let's say, an early stage SaaS startup in India like yours?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So the way I look at it is there's two different skill sets. One is obviously the technical ability. The other one, I think more important one, is being okay with ambiguity and being okay with lack of clear structure, right? Because in an early stage startup, you won't ever get like 100% clear instructions like a recipe, right? Like किसी को चाय बनाना है तो पहले पानी गरम करो, दूध डालो, चाय पत्ती डालो, इतना इतना इतना. So that kind of detailed instructions we won't be able to give because we're busy. The founders and the product managers were busy with a bunch of other things.
Right.
So the biggest thing that I've seen stand out in people who've succeeded with us, we now have a team of like 5 engineers, and we've perfected the hiring process over a bunch of iterations. Our best engineers, display this weird characteristics where they think 80% like engineers but 20% like product managers. Right? They really get embedded into the product as well as the process, and they take more responsibility and are okay with ambiguity.
Right.
So this requires, like, to put it mildly, like put it in the, I don't know if this is the right way to put it, requires balls to see that, okay, nothing is clear. Maybe I don't know what I'm doing. Maybe the founder doesn't know what he's doing, but still will make it work.
Right.
Me, him, and all of the other team will make it work. So this is one sort of skill set that I don't think any developer boot camp or any product teaches. Being okay with lack of direction and still being able to figure out and be effective, how to be effective in that. Obviously, you learn more and you put in more processes as you go, but you have to be the one putting those processes, right? Like you as well as the founder has to put those processes together. So it attracts a certain kind of person, right? Like not everyone can handle this, even if they're the most talented engineer out there. I'm sure we could have hired a very star engineer from Google and we would have to fire him in like 1 month because the lack of process and the amount of initiative you have to take to be okay with ambiguity is very different in our early stage startup, right? It's a different beast.
Right, understood. So hearing this clearly resonates with me as well, with my experience here building an early stage team. One probably area you can spend some light on it is how do you actually judge for this in the interview process? How do you, since you mentioned you've given an assignment for students to complete, how do you decide on these factors and whether these are available in a candidate or not?
Yeah. That's a great question. I don't think we have a good answer right now. Like, I don't think we do a good job of it in the interview process. We just got lucky. One of the things, I don't know if it's correlated, but like we've seen 3 or 4 data points now with the whole engineering team. People from good colleges tend to be better somehow. So we have one dude from DTU, one from NSIT, one from KIT. Like, I don't know, because that's the only data point available. I'm sure there are other proxy data points, but we've not had a chance to see what correlates. Plus, we don't have big enough a data set, or just 5 people, right? So it's not good enough to see. The other thing we look for, essentially, I'll tell you this one particular journey I think will help you understand why I rolled out an offer to this guy and he turned out to be our best engineer till now. So this guy's from NSIT. He used to work for Airtel data science team, right? Like he's from good guy, right? Like smart guy. So what he did was he worked for NSIT for a year. And then what he said was, okay, I'm very interested in this whole blockchain thing. What I'll do is I'll quit that job and take a pay cut and go at a 50% salary to a Bitcoin company. Right? Bitcoin consulting company or blockchain consulting company. He stayed there for 7-8 months, realized that the whole blockchain space is scam, right? Like it doesn't work, right? And then he was looking again. So I talked to him. I just called him up after he had called up and I said, okay, let's do this assignment. As well as one more thing is, once you do this assignment, what we need to ensure is, I just asked him, like, what made you decide to take a pay cut, 50% pay cut, and go to blockchain space. He's like, I'm young. What's the worst that can happen?
Right.
So one thing we look, like I at least got lucky with, because not a lot of engineers will have a background like this, is sort of risk-taking ability, right? Because essentially, if you're going into an unstructured environment, you're okay with risk. In fact, maybe you enjoy risk.
Yeah.
Right. So that quality, I think, has made him a great engineer for us, because now he takes on a lot more responsibility than even we ask him to, right?
Right.
So he goes and does customer support on his own. So he figures out, okay, these are the parts which are breaking. This is what we should solve first, Sourav, and then prioritizes like a PM.
Right.
That's what I observed. He's 80% engineer. He's a great engineer, but he's also 20% great PM. Right. And we give him opportunities. We say, okay, like if you want to do customer support, do customer support. Customer support is something everyone does at SalesRobot, right? Because that I think is one of those things that really sets you apart from any other candidate, because ultimately we exist because customer likes us. There's no other way. So that is the kind of thing I figured out accidentally in the interview process: risk-taking appetite. So if you can somehow figure out that, hey, this person has a risk-taking appetite, then that is a good signal for an early stage startup, because then he'll be a partial CTO or partial PM and
partial PM sort of. Yeah.
So technical ability you can teach, but attitude, lived experiences, what their childhood was like, maybe like those things play a role, man. Like, why do people start companies? I'm sure something was missing in their childhood, or they've not done enough therapy to deal with those, so they're like, okay, let's build something big, right? So I think those are good proxies to figure out what a great engineer would be at an early stage company.
Right. Yeah, that really makes sense, Sourav. Yeah, just like we were talking about risk-taking ability. I remember straight out of college as well, you started your own company.
Yeah.
Some things didn't work out then, and you again took one more bet, another big bet, and now things seem to be working. So let's just explore this part a little. What was the initial idea, and why did it not really make sense to continue that particular space?
Yeah. Great question. So like I started on right out of college. At that time, I was very technical as a person. So I was basically looking at spaces from a very tech angle. So if you look at, this is a quote actually from Steve Jobs. He says, like, whenever you're a technical person searching for a solution, searching for a problem with a solution already in hand, then it somehow doesn't tend to work.
Right.
The reason for that is you didn't start with the customer, right? Ultimately, you have to start with the customer. So what we were doing at that time, we were doing CCTV analytics, right? So what we would do is, we would have an on-premise server that would connect to all of your security cameras if you're a big residential, estate establishment or a big commercial real estate establishment. And then the algorithm would basically tell the security guards who were watching that, hey, out of these 400 cameras, only watch these 5-10 cameras at a time, because these are the ones displaying the most anomalous signals. So it worked to some degree. Like DLF Magnolia Zaralias was our customer, CyberHub was our customer. So we had some degree of success, but we were never able to replicate it because of multiple reasons. The reason number one is obviously the price point that we were selling at that point wasn't enough value for them, right? So to pay that price point. The second thing was the geography, right? Again, related to these are not tech issues. These are business pricing, packaging issues. So if you look at the other mistake fundamentally was that we were not selling to high value geography. So maybe, a DLF or a JMD megapolis won't pay, but maybe a casino in Hong Kong might pay for the same thing, right? But we didn't have real access to get there. So for us, the point was that we decided that, hey, this is something that is very heavy in terms of certain skill sets that are required to scale, right? Like at least a foreign, angle, right? Like being able to have a presence in places like Dubai, Singapore, HK, that would have scaled the business. But then we were like, okay, do we have enough capital and the appetite to do this? I realized, okay, like this, we're just out of college. This is one idea we explored, and this is clearly something that will take a lot more bandwidth to scale. Then it became a question of, do we want to do it? I was like, no, we want to do something else. So that's how we figured out to pivot the idea. In terms of this business, SalesRobot, again, it's a bootstrap, like VCs call it lifestyle business. I'm completely okay with that term. There are lifestyle businesses doing much better than VC-backed businesses out there.
Definitely.
And vice versa. So with this one, the goal was fairly straightforward. I wanted to create a product that would have a clear ROI for any company out there. So in sales tech, there is always clear ROI, right? Like, because sales team is a revenue generating team.
Right.
So if you're able to improve their operations by even X%, you can keep some percentage of X. So that was the whole thought process behind launching a sales tech company. So we've scaled down to about 400 odd customers in 30 plus countries, and we are again a product company, so that comes with its own share of challenges as well as opportunities. So we very much compete with like the Zoho, the Freshworks of the world.
Got it.
And we decided to go into this segment because we really saw that there would be a clear ROI argument to be made for any team out there, any business out there, because every business needs sales,
right.
but not every business will need CCTV analytics, right? So it was a more structure, it was a more clear ROI argument definitely for
Definitely.
Any business.
Yeah. Just going back a little to your earlier startup, you primarily dealt in the computer vision sort of a space. Yeah. Now with generative AI really transforming, do you think a product like that could have a different price point in the market? Or more generally, how do you see this affecting your spaces or areas you work in the next 5-7 years maybe?
Yeah, that's a great question. Look, generative AI is a sort of a defining event. I think it's as big as, we will look back and see that it's as big as the invention of the internet maybe. Right. It's too early to say exactly how this will play out, but I'm sure it will play out in terms of reducing the cost of intelligence, right? Intelligence is now delivered by an API call at like 3-4 cents an API call. So now I think the applications are endless, right? Like there's applications across customer support, there's applications across things like combining vision as well as when you talk about generative AI, there's obviously image AI as well as text AI as well as multimodal AI. So there's going to be applications all across the board in areas like marketing, support, sales. Like we are just now launching the next version of our SalesRobot intelligence with Sales GPT inbuilt, where we basically help salespeople write out really good cold emails based on what we know about cold emails. So we've taught ChatGPT that, and we call it Sales GPT. And now that is going to be the next version of our offering. So I see a lot of potential for disruption everywhere. But I think mostly what will happen is the incumbents will get more entrenched because everyone will move fast with this, right? Like this is the first time in the history of any innovation that incumbents have taken note very fast, right? So realize that, hey, this is pretty good and we should move fast, otherwise we'll get disrupted. So I don't know exactly how this will play out. I think there'll be disruption for sure.
Yeah.
But I overall feel that incumbents will get more entrenched.
Got it. So as we both seem to agree, the world really is changing fast. There is a disruption in waiting across sectors. Suppose you were talking to a fourth year student in Indian college in, let's say, a small town, right? So what would be some pieces of advice or some suggestions that you'd like to give them so that they are able to sort of leverage this and move ahead in their lives?
Yeah, it's a great question. Look, there's this really nice quote I like by Jeff Bezos, who said, a lot of people focus on things that change. I like to focus on things that don't change, right? What will remain constant over the next 10 years? So this is the thought process he took when he was launching Amazon Prime. He said, will people like it if I deliver their parcel 10 days later? No, you will always want it to be as early as possible. So no matter what changes, this won't change, right? Like people would like their stuff delivered as soon as possible. So with that in mind, my advice would be something very straightforward, right? Like lots of things are changing, bunch of things not changing, right? What are the fundamentals? So if we get back to the fundamentals of software principles, the basics don't change, right? obviously you get a lot of help now with things like ChatGPT. It's almost like a great teacher that you never had, right, in your college, where your college teacher doesn't know anything, right, but that's your replacement teacher. So what will happen, what you need to pay attention to is things that don't change. By things that don't change, I mean the fundamentals. Fundamentals means the basics of computer science as a discipline, right? Things like how do you work with data structures to some degree. Over that, what frameworks look like for building good products, because more products will come out, right? If this whole thing has to succeed. So how do you build good products? So that includes things like design. A lot of developers don't pay attention to that. That's important to some degree, understanding design. Then to some degree, understanding the mechanics behind it, the UI, UX, the front end side of it, and then the back end side, how the business logic works, and how things are stitched together. And then finally, a broad view of deployment. So my suggestions would be to, rather than specialize, if you are looking to work at a early stage startup, you should get a broad cut of multiple different disciplines, which includes things like design, which includes things like front end, back end, and DevOps, right? If you get a broad cut of these 4 experiences and you're able to build products and deploy on your own, then you're suddenly like in the top 1% of developers, because some people are just comfortable with front end, some are back end only, and then they put themselves up into these nice little boxes, and then that constrains them, right? Initially, it's not a good idea to constrain, but later on, you just pick one, right? Out of all this, once you've experienced. So my advice would be to just get a hang of how to work with APIs on the back end in general. Like now, everything is API, right? Intelligence is being delivered by an API, so there's nothing left, right? All you have to do is prompt engineer an API, right? So no use specializing in AI, ML. At least that's my take, right? Because OpenAI will become a foundational layer, for AI, ML. Unless you want to do research, it's completely different. This advice is for people, 4th yearites, who want to work at product startups, right? Like product early stage startups. I think and the other thing is somehow try to build up a risk appetite in life. What's the worst that can happen, right? Like I know I come from a little bit of privilege. Like my parents obviously supported me. I have to acknowledge that while taking risks. But if you can take risks, because right now, what's the worst? Like you're not married, you don't have a kid and a wife depending on you or whatever. Like just take risks. What's the worst that can happen? Like whatever it is, you can figure it out, right? Like if you have that attitude, then more often than not, I've seen that it helps than it hurts.
Right. Okay, guys. So that was our discussion with Sourav. In an ever-changing world, like Sourav said, some things will remain the same. There are people still building great businesses from India, looking to hire great engineers. So just focus on the basics and you'll be fine.
Yeah. It's not the sexy advice like, hey, you need to specialize in AI, ML. You need to As long as you know the basics, it's weird. Like, the same advice applies to business also, right? Like if you focus on the basics, you'll do well. And the same advice applies to engineering also. If you focus on the basics, you'll do well. Right? It's just as simple as that.
All right, guys. Thank you so much.